All anxious feelings begin with a thought, like an interpretation. And a lot of times, those interpretations not serving you are irrational, that are catastrophizing, which is one of the bigger traps that we talk about, where we really kind of think, okay, the worst thing is going to happen to me, and if it does happen, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be a disaster. So when you go to Germany, you look at it objectively, you know that that's not the case. But I'll tell you my favorite. My number one favorite is emotional reasoning. Because I have this feeling, because I have this thought, it must be true. But I only say feelings are not fact.
Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Reigeter, and today I'm joined by Dr. Terri Bacow, a licensed psychologist and the author of Goodbye Anxiety, a guided journal for overcoming worry. In this episode, Dr. Terri walks us through the key differences between everyday worry and clinical anxiety. She shares insights from her guided journal, helping us to identify thinking traps, reframe anxious thoughts, and build tools to manage stress in a healthier way. Dr. Bacow, thank you so much for meeting with me today. I am very excited for our conversation, but before we begin, I want to check in. How are you really?
I'm going to be absolutely honest. I am really tired. I am otherwise okay, but just really needing some sleep.
Thank you for being honest. A lot of times we're not honest when we answer that question. And I've been feeling that way too. Very, very tired, in need of sleep. Not, honestly, for me, not prioritizing my rest, prioritizing a lot of other things. And then feel bad if someone asks me how I am and I say that I'm tired. It's so normal. We all get that way. And if we don't talk about it, we think we're the only ones.
Correct.
Right? And then how does everyone else have this energy and I don't? And then I turn into a anxiety spiral of what is wrong with me? All because no one talks about it.
So incredibly common.
And it's so frustrating because if we just talked more openly about what we were feeling and going through, at least for me, I would not be stuck in my head all the time.
I think that is spot on. A lot of times, if someone asks me how I'm doing, I'll just say okay, so that I don't have to go into the entire thing.
Yeah. It's hard, right? It's like balancing how much do I say, what do they want to hear. Lately, I've been trying to do it in a few words that's honest, but not taking up like 20 minutes of someone's time telling them how I'm feeling. And that's been really hard to cultivate, but it's been very hard to catch myself. Because a lot of times every morning I walk by concierge in my building and they say, how are you? And I'm like, good, and keep walking. And then I'm like, oh, I should have just responded with, I should have stopped and looked at them, right? Waited for them to answer. It's hard, but it's so important.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the more that we practice, the more comfortable it will feel.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's the case with everything related to our mental health. The more we practice these tools, the more comfortable we get with them and the easier they are to actually adapt without thinking it through. And that's what I loved about your workbook, reading through it. You know, we're going to talk about this a lot today. Goodbye Anxiety, a guided journal for overcoming worry. I loved it so much because it really helped me gain practical tools. It helped me understand this is where that catastrophizing thought is coming from. It's catastrophizing. It gave me a name. It gave me a reframe. It really helped break it all down in a way that I could digest. And now I'm slowly recognizing months later after doing it for the first time that I'm adapting it without having to stop and catch myself.
That's fantastic. I mean, I'm so glad that you love the book and that it helps you, which is my goal.
Well, you did an amazing job. And I know today we're going to talk about this. So to start it all off, one thing I really loved in the book was how you broke down the difference between worry and then when it turns into anxiety, because there's anxiety is a buzzword right now, which is cool. We're talking about it. However, there's a difference between a healthy level of worry and anxiety that is feeling debilitating or impacting our functioning. So to start off, can you tell us a little bit more about the difference between worry and anxiety?
Absolutely. So anxiety is an umbrella term of worry felt underneath that. Worry is something that we all do. If worry is excessive, then maybe we can refer to it as an anxiety disorder. But the way that we recognize anxiety is that if it begins to interfere in our lives. And what I mean by that is every one of us feels anxious from time to time. It's adaptive, it's evolutionary, it protects us from danger. If you have a test, you should be a little anxious about it, just a little bit. However, if you find that your anxiety is occurring more days than not, for 6 months or more, and you are not sleeping, or you can't focus, or it's really preoccupying you and messing up your life, creating problems like you're canceling plans, you're not functioning as you said, then that is what we call problematic anxiety, where it's a good moment to seek help.
Thank you for breaking that down, because one thing I really didn't like growing up was when I would try to explain how worried I was or stressed out or anxious. And people would say, well, everyone's anxious. Everyone feels that way. That's normal. And yes, everyone experiences worry and a form of anxiety. Not everyone experiences an anxiety disorder. And for me, walking into a test, still to this day, I actually take a performance anxiety medication now, bupropion, before taking one, because my entire body just shakes. My heart rate is so fast. I am sweating. I can't catch my breath. I won't sleep for days before. I won't be able to eat. I will vomit. I get very, very overly anxious. And it's not the same as someone else who is worried about the test. I can't function to take the test, and being able to recognize, yes, feelings of anxiety are normal, feelings of worry are normal, but also recognize, hey, there's a line that maybe we should talk to someone at some point.
100%. The way you described that was so um, articulate, and I think a lot of people are going to relate to that experience. And it's definitely a great example of the kind of anxiety you should not have to suffer with. And you don't have to. You can get help. You can take medication. You can go to therapy. You can read about it and learn about it. You don't have to suffer.
Exactly. You don't have to suffer. There's so many different tools. Not everyone wants to do medication. Not everyone wants to do therapy. Not everyone wants to use a book, but you can find what works for you. And that's been so helpful for me. And honestly, for me, it's been a mix of everything. It's finding those books that have those tangible tools that I relate to the way that it's written. I can grasp and understand it very much like yours, which I really again appreciate. And having a therapist who validates and not invalidates, but also calls out the thinking, doesn't let me just go to that spiral of
Yeah,
catastrophizing. There we go. Actually tells me, Francesca, you're catastrophizing again. Let's break it down. Let's go back. Having those guides has been so helpful. But for me, it's been a mix, and it took years, years and years and years to find the right tools.
so sorry it took more time for you, but I'm glad that you are where you are right now. And it sounds like you really did skillfully use a combination of approaches to get to where you are. So that's a great example. You should be proud.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really great when you start to find the tools that work for you, but it's even greater when you get to share them. And that's what I love about this podcast. That's why when I read your book and I went through it, I was like, we have to have this conversation, because this is what we need to be doing. We need to be talking about it. I remember reading it for the first time, walking through it, the catastrophizing the worst case scenario, being unlikely, hearing that and thinking, I guess maybe what if that doesn't happen? Instead of what if I fail and I fail this test, fail out of school, don't get a job, end up living in a box under a bridge. Unlikely going to happen. Very unlikely that it's unlikely that I was going to fail the test to begin with, but even more so unlikely that I failed one test and the entire everything falls apart. So being able to recognize maybe challenging that thought early on instead of continuing to spiral through it is so incredibly helpful.
It's so obvious that you've absorbed what the spirit of cognitive behavioral therapy is. That's the approach that I talk about in my book. And it's really based on the idea that all anxious feelings begin with a thought, with an interpretation. And a lot of times, those interpretations, not judging you, are irrational, that are catastrophizing, which is one of the thinking traps that we talk about, where we really kind of think, okay, the worst thing is going to happen to me. And if it does happen, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be a disaster. You know, if I get a bad grade on this test, it's going to be so awful. And then when you break it down and you look at it objectively, you realize that's not the case.
Yeah, so true. It really, these thinking traps, they're so powerful. Our brain has so much power. And I don't know why I never realized it, but it really does. And all it takes is that one thought to pop into my head, like you said, the way I interpret it, and then spiraling till I can't breathe. So, on the note of these thinking traps, what are some other common thinking traps that we may be susceptible to?
Ooh, well, I'll tell you my favorite. My number one favorite is emotional reasoning. What that is when we reason with our emotions, when we think, because I have this feeling, because I have this thought, it must be true. But I always say feelings are not facts. Feelings are certainly legitimate. You're allowed to have feelings. They're just not always factual. So I like emotional reasoning. Another one, this is from my book, guilt tripping, when we feel so guilty. You know, oh, I didn't respond to this text. I'm such a bad person. And then you feel guilt. And then to challenge that, I would say, well, what did you do that was so bad? You know, maybe you were busy. Maybe you could have responded to that text right away. This is a common one amongst women. I'm sure men do it too, but as the girls and women, we really feel that guilt.
Yes, that guilt. Oh, I did that to myself yesterday because here's the thing, LinkedIn, those promotional messages take up your entire inbox. And then you miss that one important message you should have responded to. And then I see it months later. And I was like, oh no, I am the worst person ever. How did I not answer this person? They asked for my help with something. And just spiral down how terrible I am. And it wasn't an intentional, malicious, I don't want to help this person, I don't want to answer. I genuinely just got stuck with all those promotional messages.
That is such a great example to demonstrate the thinking trap. And I'm so glad that you caught yourself in the way you were talking to yourself. You would not speak to yourself in that way to a friend. You wouldn't. If a friend came to you with this story, you would say it's not your fault. You had good intention. It was an easy mistake.
Yes, I realized I am so nice and like understanding with my friends all the time. I never expected to be a malicious thing. Myself, I am always like ready to criticize and like beat down. I've really had to learn to recognize when those thoughts are happening. Usually I don't recognize it till I'm feeling bad. And then going into that emotional reasoning, I feel this way, so I must be this way. This must be true. And then it just, these thinking traps all go together, is what I've realized.
Oh my goodness. So a lot of times when I work with clients who are anxious, I present them with a list of thinking traps. There's about 12 to 15. I put many of them in my book. And I show them the list and I say, do any of these resonate with you? And people usually say, all of them. Every single one is something that I am familiar with.
I believe it. I wish people were talking about this more. I wish I learned this so much earlier in life because I spent so much time learning to not like myself, learning to hate myself based on the thoughts in my brain that I didn't know weren't true. Because everyone said, well, everyone feels that way sometimes. Yes. But if we don't talk about what that is, we don't identify, this is when it becomes a problem. And even if it isn't a problem right now, here are tools that can help you get through it so it doesn't grow.
Absolutely. This is why naming things has so much power. When we don't need to label everything, but labeling and naming anxiety, it's powerful. It gives you a framework for how maybe your thinking is a little bit over the top and might not be accurate. This is why some of my other favorite thinking traps are jumping to conclusions and fortune telling. Fortune telling is when we try to predict the future. Mind reading is when we try to think we know what somebody is thinking about us, even though we cannot read minds. We're not fortune tellers.
Yes. Oh, I do that all the time. I'm totally convinced that I know what someone's thinking about me. And then I've noticed a lot of times I was going through life so worried about what other people were thinking about me that I had no idea what I was doing in the present moment. And I started to disconnect from myself completely because I was trying to fit into what my friends thought I should be versus what my family thought I should be versus what my teachers thought I should be. So worrying about what everyone else is seeing me as made me want to fit the mold of what I should be. And then I had no idea who I was or what I liked or what I wanted. Scary.
That's really hard. And I hope you've gotten to a place where you can really take your own needs into account. You know, your needs are not less important than the needs of others. Other people might want you to do things, but it doesn't mean you have to do them.
Exactly. That's been a very important lesson that I've been learning. I don't, I can prioritize myself and my own beliefs and values, and I can listen to myself, even if it's different from everyone around me. Because if we all have the same values and beliefs, there's a good chance that we're all conforming, first of all, to the idea of what we think we all should be. We're all matching each other where we're at. All of us are probably very different. And it takes one person to stand out and explore who they are for someone else to see, hey, it's okay to talk about this. It's okay to answer, how are you? Honestly, it's okay to pick up a self help workbook and start doing these tools and exercises. It's okay to do something that's different.
It's absolutely okay. And I do think it takes time to recognize that. I think many of us, especially the people pleasers amongst us, you know, we don't always get there immediately.
Yeah, exactly. It's so it's so important that we listen to ourselves and that we listen to the thoughts in our brain. We listen to what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and how it's contributing to our behaviors. It's contributing to how we present ourselves to others and to ourselves. Because I know for me, when I'm stuck in these thinking traps, I'm often lying to myself a lot, trying to convince myself that I'm totally okay and that everything's fine. And when I'm able to recognize these are the thoughts in my brain, I'm not actually doing as okay as I think I am. I need support. Then I can start becoming me again instead of this like facade of what I think I should be presenting myself as.
I love that you talk about the thoughts that are lying to you. Your anxiety is frequently lying to you. I use a lot of metaphors. For example, fake news, you know, or junk mail. We got the junk mail into our brain, and it takes up space, run free inside your head. And a lot of times we think that our thoughts are the objective truth by virtue of the fact that we're thinking that. But thoughts are opinion, they are subjective. Thinking something doesn't make it true.
Exactly. And you're only seeing it from your perspective. You are only seeing it from your perspective. So it's likely not fully true. There may be a piece of it, right? That could be a tiny bit true. Could be wording it very differently to yourself in a very harsh and critical way. Or it could just not be true at all. But we're only seeing it from our perspective. We really can't decide that it's completely true. And I think that's been very important for me, recognizing, going back to what you said earlier, how would I approach this with a friend? If a friend was talking to me like this, what would I say? Would I genuinely believe how she's describing herself? Or would I give her more compassion and help reframe it? And when I separate myself out of my own first party perspective and into like a third party perspective, I realize I'm not as terrible as my brain likes to tell me I am.
Yes, and the fun thing is important. I have a line in my book, tell a friend. What would you tell a friend in that situation? If a friend came to you freaking out, panicking about going on a date or making a mistake, you would tell that friend, it's not that big of a deal. Trust me, you're going to be fine. Yet, it's really hard to say these things to ourselves. We can't be as objective.
I know, and it's so frustrating, especially when you know, you know it's not true, right? Part of you knows it's not true, even if your brain doesn't want to admit it. And you know that you wouldn't talk to your friends like this. You would be so compassionate and kind to them. But then for yourself, it's so hard to want to be nice to yourself. And I don't know why. I mean, I'm stuck with myself forever. I might as well be kind to myself, but nope.
It's hard for us to be compassionate. I think a lot of us have been socialized to believe that you need to be hard on yourself to be motivated, that you need to kind of clock the work to get work done. And actually, the research shows otherwise. The research in self compassion shows that a self compassionate mindset really motivates behavior change far more than self criticism.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I honestly, I do believe that. But I totally fall into that trap of if I'm so hard on myself, then I'll work harder. That's where my motivation comes from. In my class last night, I made the mistake of letting my teacher use me as the example to do a clinical interview. And he was like, answer honestly. I was like, okay. Should not have done that because he looked at me and was like, why are you so, you don't want to sleep, you don't want to eat, you want to just keep going all the time? And I was like, yes. He's like, you're giving yourself the anxiety. And I was like, yes, but it's motivating me to keep going and work harder. It's like, but what if you did that without feeling like you couldn't function all day, every day? You didn't feel sick every day. And I was like, no, that wouldn't work.
That's a great reframe. And I think this is the kind of reframe we need. CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, is all about perspective shifting. You know, there's one point of view. One point of view is I need to work myself into the ground. Another point of view is maybe this is not a good idea. Maybe the burnout is not worth it. Maybe I could work smarter, not harder.
Yes, and it's such an important reframe. But again, this is not something we talk about all the time. I know for me, I grew up in this idea of hustle culture, where you just had to keep going. Life was all about how much you could produce. And it made me believe that I have to constantly keep going at the risk of my own mental well-being, my own like happiness and time, just so that I could be worthy and valuable, do enough to be considered good enough. And that's really hard. But these are a lot of times messages we're getting from society and the world around us. And they're forming kind of like a core sense of belief of who we have to be.
A lot of my clients, I talk with them about this equation: worth equals work, or work equals worth. It's not a good equation to have.
No, it is not. And oh, honestly, that's probably where I'm at. And I'm so happy you said that. Now I'm going to go and reflect on this for the next few days because it's so true. When we think work equals our worth, we often don't give ourselves, we give ourselves no credit. We give ourselves no credit and no value. We assign value to external things. And what happens when, I know for me, if the Wi-Fi goes out and I can't get work done, I am so mad at myself that I got nothing accomplished. Or if I work really hard on something and it's not maybe praised by others, I don't get that external validation. No longer does it have any worth. And being able to recognize my worth does not depend on production. It does not depend on people, the way people receive it or validation. It just depends. It relies on me being a human being and existing. That's where worth comes from.
Exactly. All you have to do is be exactly who you are. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. And the problem with putting all of your eggs into one basket is that if the basket breaks, then you feel really awful about yourself. So it's important to have a lot of different sources of self-esteem, not just one.
Yes, so true. And going back to anxiety, it often prevents me from being able to be myself because it has me so worried about everything else. It has me so worried about I'm going to make one small choice and it's not going to go well, and then the world is going to end. Or people are going to see me a certain way if I do this, so I can't do this. I can't do something I enjoy. And then I disconnect more and more from myself. And when our worth comes from just being ourselves, learning to recognize these thinking traps, learning to recognize some of the anxiety, we can begin to reconnect to ourselves. And when we see ourselves as we are, we really do, at least for me, begin to see more value in myself outside of the external factors.
That is the journey, that's the goal. And that's why I try to talk in the book about failure and mistake and self-compassion, because when we feel that we screwed up badly, when we feel that we failed, that is a form of anxiety. It really stays with us. And we need to challenge it by reframing, by being kinder to ourselves, and not even lowering our standards, but modifying them, bringing them to a more realistic place.
Yes, to that realistic place. And that's the key because I know for me, when I was first starting with working through my mental health, it was beginning of the COVID years where TikTok was what we all were on. And it was very much think positive. And when my brain could not think positive, I could not go from I hate myself to I love myself in one step,
Of
but
course,
able to be more realistic in how I can begin to take small steps toward loving myself. That changed everything. But it's learning to be realistic with where you're at and taking those small steps instead of these idealistic jumps is so important.
yes. And where my mind is going now is toxic positivity.
Yeah.
One of the things I talk about in my book is, can you speak to yourself in a more balanced way? It doesn't have to be overly positive. It does not need to be rainbows and unicorns. Everything's amazing. It just needs to be more balanced and less, little bit less negative, a little more accurate in our self-assessment. Not, oh my gosh, I am the king of the universe, but I'm pretty good.
Yes, exactly. And I loved that in the book because finding that balance, being able to, I mean, again, just recognize these negative thoughts and be able to meet ourselves where we are, see ourselves as we are, not see ourselves in the context of the negative thoughts or try to force ourselves into the context of perfection because I wish life was all sunshine and rainbows. It would be really fun and pretty and great. But unfortunately, at least not yet for me, it's not. So being able to find that balance where, yeah, it rains and storms, but there's also rainbows and sunshine and finding where they coexist.
Yes, and many of us are closeted perfectionists. Many of us, your thinker talk about it. I think we need to talk about more the climate that we're in, where perfection has become the norm. And I always say, perfection doesn't exist. It's a construct that only exists in the dictionary.
Yes, that is so true. I, oh, my teacher pointed that out in our clinical interview example last night in class. It's like, you are a perfectionist. It's like, yes, I like to be perfect. I like when everything around me is perfect. I was like, that is why you get 3 a.m. emails from me freaking out about the paper due. I wasn't, your emails would be a little less full. So being able to recognize that fear of not being perfect, that desire to be kind of wrapped up with a little bow, really contributes to so much of my anxiety because I'm continuously worried about that one mistake and convinced that that's going to ruin everything.
Sure, and I think mistakes are an interesting topic of conversation because they are inevitable, unavoidable, not a big deal, and a great opportunity to learn. How else are we going to learn? We didn't know, but we didn't know, and now we do.
Exactly. I anything that I've learned and grown through the past few years has come from mistakes. Learning that I had to remember the date to file the sales and use tax form came from getting a fine multiple times, right? Making mistakes taught me to pay more attention to things. Making mistakes and not prioritizing my mental health, ending up in a psychiatric unit, taught me that I had to learn ways to support my mental health and figure it out as I go. But if I didn't make small mistakes that led me into these positions, I never would have learned and grown. And I would have been stuck in the same kind of pattern of not getting anywhere. So, as much as I hate mistakes, I guess they're helpful.
Totally, and it's so true. It's the only way we learn. I mean, there's other ways to learn too, books, but mistakes are really powerful teachers. We remember them, and they motivate us to try something different.
Yes, they do. And I think for me, it's also a reminder that when I recognize that I made a mistake and am willing to admit it, those are important pieces, um, that I'm human and that that's okay. Because I want to see myself as like Wonder Woman or like a machine that can do it all the time. And being able to recognize I made a mistake, I can't, I'm human, it allows me to make time to feel instead of just kind of work through everything and push everything down until it comes out later.
And it's impossible to avoid making them, so we should not be so hard on ourselves about it. Really, the best way is like you said, to admit it. This happened, wasn't great, not a big deal. Let me change my strategy.
Exactly. And that is exactly what I've been trying to do, especially with my mental health, just being able to recognize that these thinking traps, those are not the truth. So when I am sitting there instead of studying for my exam, having a complete inability to breathe, panic attack, convincing myself that I've already failed and the world is going to end and I'm going to end up alone with no one, being able to recognize I could just breathe through it, find some tools to reframe, and make time to study so that I can do well. The mistake was stopping to study and sitting in those negative thoughts and allowing them to take over. So recognizing it has really helped me move forward, whether it's with school or work or just life in general.
And when you were kind of describing this experience of sitting in the room, there were so many different thinking traps and that kind of stream of consciousness. You were overgeneralizing, you were catastrophizing, you were certainly fortune telling, you were making predictions that it was going to end so badly. But we really just never have any idea how things are going to turn out. We don't have a crystal ball. We can't see the future. We don't know that something is going to be bad. We say that there's, the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and then the most likely scenario. When we're emotional, we forget about that.
Yeah, that is so true. Oh, this is what I loved so much about your book. Oh, it was so good. Okay, so as we're wrapping up, can you give a quick overview of your workbook of Goodbye Anxiety, a guided journal for overcoming worry, and how people can find it?
Oh, of course. So here's the book. What I like about it is obviously I'm biased, I'm the author. But you can see, hopefully for those watching by video, that it's not long, it's not intimidating, it's short. There's 3 sections. The first includes prompts to help people identify their worries. And there's a lot of catchy song titles in there. And the second part is about the thinking traps as you described, that I described them, and how to challenge them, not just what they are, but what questions to ask to argue with the logic and the thinking traps so that you can reframe and come up with a coping statement or a more reasonable perspective. And then lastly, the last section of the book is called How Can I Overcome Worry? And it discusses several themes that come up when we worry, control, perfectionism, discomfort, panic, all of those themes. And I have one page that kind of describes what the theme is, and the next page is how to work with that theme of what coping statement, affirmation, things that you could say to yourself to help you think about that differently. And people can get this book on Amazon. I believe, I don't quite know because it's been a few years, but when it came out, it was in Barnes and Noble and it was in Urban Outfitters. And my friend would send me photos when they would see the book at the store, which was nice. I believe you could also get it online at Barnes and Noble.
And again, one thing I really loved about it was you don't have to have any background in mental health. You don't have to have taken a psychology class. You don't have to be a professional. You don't have to be able to even define anxiety when you pick up that book. You really walk the reader through it and break it down in such easy ways with questions that you actually can reflect on and answer. It's not overwhelming. It's not like a typical, maybe mental health book where there's big words that you have to try to grab a dictionary to figure out. It's really digestible. It's really meant for anyone to be able to begin working through. So I appreciate you and the book so much, the work you're doing, the conversation we had. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.